Good evening, good evening, good evening. As we continue this journey, we're going to get into some key figures. Now, getting into all the key figures, it's going to take a couple of episodes. So, today, let's start off with three. Let's start with Theodore Herzl, May 2nd, 1860 to July 3rd, 1904. He is the founder of political Zionism, which is a movement to establish a Jewish homeland. He was a Austro-Hungarian Jewish political activist and journalist and a moderately successful playwright. He was from a prosperous neolog Jewish family. In 1896, through his pamphlet entitled The Jewish State, he stated that the Jewish question was political and should be settled through a World Council of Nations. In August of 1897, he organized a World Congress of Zionists in Basel, Switzerland. He then became the first president of the World Zionist Organization, the WZO. If you're not familiar with that, in a previous episode, we do discuss that. And the WZO was established through the Congress. He was a relentless diplomat, organizer, and propagandist. He was at the forefront of making Zionism a globally significant political movement. Let's talk about his early life a little bit so you kind of get an understanding as to how he got to where he got to and why he was so gung ho with Zionism becoming worldwide. In 1878, his family moved from Budapest to Vienna. He attended, the University of Vienna to study law. In 1884, he was licensed to practice law, but decided to focus on literature. In 1889, he married Julie Naschauer, who was the daughter of a wealthy Jewish businessman in Vienna. Now, although a father of three, this was not a happy marriage at all. Not for anybody involved in this marriage, especially his wife. Herzl's mother was a boy mom, and he was extremely attached to her, and she did not like his wife. So there was just no peace. And it also took a toll on their marriage because she was not interested in his political interests, and his political interests increased over the years, and his activism increased over the years. He did not care about anything else more than he cared about Zionism and it becoming global and political. His conversion into Zionism, according to him, began in the fall of 1891 when he moved to Paris due to a promotion to becoming a correspondent for a newspaper. He contended that there was the same amount of anti-Semitism in France as there was in Austria. Up to this point, he had viewed anti-Semitism as a social problem that assimilation could fix. It's such a white answer. You don't need to assimilate to be a part of society. But the assimilation is assimilating into white society and white acceptance. So he then began to believe that the answer to anti Semitism was Jewish organized counter efforts. Now, the Dreyfus affair confirmed this idea for him. And just a little brief, like a Cliff Notes look at the Dreyfus affair. This occurred from 1894 to 1906 during the Third Republic in France. It was a controversy centered on whether or not Alfred Dreyfus, an army captain, was guilty of selling military secrets to Germany. The sale supposedly took place in December of 1894. He was convicted based on a forgery. A lot of anti-Semitism emerged publicly. Sound familiar? Nothing is new in history. As long as they keep hiding true history, rewriting it, whitewashing it, and everything, we're going to keep repeating it. And the perpetrators of the most egregious acts utilize the same talking points and the same things over and over and over again. When you don't like a community, you vilify the crap out of them. You become, society as a whole becomes anti this community. Uh, in July of 1906, an appeals court set aside the original judgment, but it wasn't until 1995 that the French army publicly declared his innocence. Now, the Dreyfus Affair, per Herzl, the aftermath made a Zionist out of him. He believed that the existence of anti Semitism meant that Jewish assimilation was impossible. First of all, assimilation should never be the goal. Sorry, my nose cuff is running away from me. Assimilation should never be the goal. You should not give up your heritage and your culture to take on someone else's. You're erasing your identity. Either way, you're allowing the oppressor to win. Now, just living side by side with people in society, respect them, they can respect you. You want people to respect your religion, respect other people's religion. You want people to respect your existence, respect other people's existence. You want people to respect what your ancestors have been through, respect what other people's ancestors have been through. Far too often in society, and you see it a lot with Zionist Jewish people, they act as if they're the only ones that had an atrocity committed against them. And they close their ears to everyone else. And then that section of the Jewish community wonders why nobody likes them. And then they take not being likable as anti Semitic. That's not the case. I am Black. If you choose not to like me as an individual because of how I present myself to you, that is not you being anti Black. That is just us not meshing. Now, moving on to Max Simon Nordau, who started off as Max Simon Sudfeld, July 29th, 1849 to, we're just going to take that out for now, to January 22nd, 1923. He was a Zionist leader, social critic, physician, and author, and early Jewish nationalist. He is the co-founder of the Zionist organization, and he was the president or the vice president of many Zionist congresses. He did write some books, and let's go over a few of these books. In 1883, he released The Conventional Lies of Our Civilization, which was his greatest literary success in his life. There were approximately 73 editions that were printed. Now, this book was a vitriolic attack on the inadequacy of 19th century institutions to human needs. It was particularly harsh in regards to its view on organized religion and was banned in Austria and Russia. In 1892, he wrote the book Degeneration, which out of the books that he wrote is the most quoted since his death. And Degeneration attacks degenerate art, and it is a commentary on rapid urbanization and its perceived effects on the body. It contends that degeneration should be classified as a mental illness and treated with therapy. Whew. And in 1896, he released Paradoxes. In 1880, he permanently moved to Paris and established a medical practice. He previously worked as a Viennese correspondent with the Budapest newspaper, which allowed him to travel through Europe. In 1892, he met Theodor Herzl and became deeply interested in Zionism. Now, after the death of Herzl, he broke with what he called practical Zionists, which were younger men advocating colonization of Palestine without guarantees of political sovereignty. This group of practical Zionists gained control of the Zionist congresses. Therefore, after 1911, uh, Nordau refused any participation with any of their meetings. Oh, actually, I forgot someone. So we're going to do 4 people today. My apologies. Keep in mind, these are notes from over the years that I'm putting in here each day as we go through. Now let's talk about Abraham Feinberg. Now, the vast majority of this information does come from his FBI file, which was released, of course, heavily redacted. So that's what we're going to go from. Abraham Feinberg, 1908 to 1998. He is best known for lobbying for the State of Israel. He organized Truman's whistle stop fundraising tour that saved his 1948 presidential campaign from ruin. Now, the whistle stop tour was a train tour, and it's generally where a politician makes a series of short appearances or speeches at a number of small towns, kind of similar to what Joe Biden did during the last presidential election, similar. Now, according to Feinberg's obituary, he had a role in trafficking arms to Jewish fighters in Palestine. Yeah, stick a pin in that. We're gonna come up to that. He is a founder of Americans for Haganah and also a founder of Foundry Associates Incorporated. He was deeply involved in the Haganah arms smuggling network within the United States. Now, the Haganah arms smuggling network since 1929 was smuggling arms to Jewish people in Palestine on a large scale in order to help them take control of Palestine. On October 31st, 1958, per an entry in the diary of Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion, Feinberg was a, and I quote, wealthy Jewish businessman and major Democratic fundraiser who raised money for Israel's nuclear weapons program among Benedictors in the United States. Benedictors, basically independent, determined, and secretive. Excuse me. In 1960, he funded AIPAC as it mounted United States disinformation campaigns. Isn't it funny that the United States knows that these organizations are waging disinformation campaigns and they just let it happen? Wonder why. But in 1960, the disinformation campaign was about Israel's nuclear weapons program. In 1952, he was ordered to register the Israel Speaks newsletter as a foreign agent. Now, with his close associate, David Wall, they decided just to close the newsletter down. They had considered selling it previously, and they were like, nah, we'll just shut it down. Now, David Wall, an important note that since the 1930s, he was registered as an undercover Soviet agent, codenamed Pink. Just a lot of spies in the midst and around all of these organizations. Interesting. Now, Feinberg was under FBI surveillance / investigations for a multitude of things for a multitude of years. Let's go over them. Espionage. Shocker. Dodging the draft of World War II. The Foundry Associates being a front regarding arms trafficking. Early in the 1960s, he was investigated due to frequent meetings with Israeli intelligence officers. Now, there was no surveillance of him during the Johnson administration. You know, the dude that took over after JFK was assassinated. Now, this time, by many, especially some reporters, is said to be Feinberg's time of greatest influence, not only of a presidential administration, but over United States policy. Well, if you have the administration, I guess so. And if your cause is so great, why do you have to be so sneaky and kind of strong arm people into things? But let's continue. And for our final person for the evening, Thomas A. Dine, born February 29th, 1940. Yeah, he's still kicking it. He is a former senior policy advisor at the Israel Policy Forum, IPF. He helped excuse me, he helped with the development of decision-making, programming, and policy from the Washington office, former CEO of the Jewish Community Federation of San Francisco, president of Radio Free Europe slash Radio Liberty in Prague, assistant administrator to of Europe and the new independent states of Eurasia at USAID. USAID is the United States Agency for International Development. They are responsible for administering civilian foreign aid and development assistance. From 1980 to 1993, he was the executive director for APAC. He's a consultant to Al Hira, which is a United States based public Arabic language TV channel. And here's a little bit more information on Al Hira. It's a United States government owned Arabic language satellite TV channel. It broadcasts current affairs and news to North Africa and the Middle East. It's barred from being broadcast within the United States under the 1948 Smith-Mundt Act. Now, from 1962 to 1964, he was a volunteer with the Peace Corps, volunteering in the Philippines. From 1973 to 1974, he was a senior analyst within the United States Senate Special Committee on National Emergencies and Delegated Powers. 1975 to 1978, he was an employee of the Senate Budget Committee. 1979 to 1980, he was an advisor to Senator Edmund Muskie, and he advised him regarding nuclear weapons policy and the strategic arms limitation talks. He also was a defense and foreign policy advisor to Senator Edward M. Kennedy. From 1993 to 1997, he was the assistant administrator for Europe and the new independent states, NIS, via the United States Agency for International Development. In April of 2013, he was one of 100 prominent United States Jewish individuals that, through a letter, urged Benjamin Netanyahu to work closely with John Kerry, then Secretary of State, to, and I quote, to devise pragmatic initiatives consistent with Israel's security needs, which would represent Israel's readiness to make painful territorial sacrifices for the sake of peace. Now, we know they made no sacrifices of territory. And how would it be painful? It wasn't even your land to begin with. Like, how's it painful for you to give back something that you stole? I guess. Dine is also a member of the Prague Society for International Cooperation. They sure do make sure that they get a lot of people into a lot of areas of politics, from Capitol Hill all the way down to local jurisdictions. As always, thank you for joining me here. I will see you tomorrow where we will go over another handful of key figures that are connected to Zionism and AIPAC. And if you have not watched the other episodes, please do so you're all caught up. And until next time.